Fees, delays, permissions. Power rarely announces itself as force. It presents itself as process. Friction is the most effective form of control ever invented because it doesn't feel like oppression. It feels reasonable. It feels administrative. It feels necessary. A small delay, a modest fee, one more form, one more approval. Individually, none of these feel threatening. Together, they define the boundary between freedom and dependence. Friction is resistance introduced into flow. In physics, friction converts movement into heat, energy lost to the system. In financial systems, friction converts movement into revenue and authority. Every time value changes hands and something skims the surface, friction is at work. Transaction fees, processing delays, minimum balances, withdrawal limits, approval requirements, settlement windows. These are not accidents. They are design choices. Friction slows movement just enough to be monitored, measured, and monetized. Force creates resistance. Friction creates compliance. When people are blocked outright, they push back. When they are slowed slightly, they adapt. They internalize the rules. They plan around the delays. They stop questioning the cost. Over time, friction becomes invisible. A system that openly restricts movement must constantly justify itself. A system that merely inconveniences movement trains people to self-regulate. That is far more efficient. Permission is friction disguised as protection, approved, pending, under review. These words sound neutral, even reassuring. But permission is simply delayed access granted at someone else's discretion. The longer permission takes, the more power the gatekeeper holds. When permission becomes normal, ownership becomes symbolic. You may own value, but only within boundaries defined for you. Time is the most underestimated cost. A delay is not just waiting, it is lost optionality. While value is frozen, opportunities pass. Needs change. Risk accumulates. Those who control settlement time control exposure, and delays are rarely symmetrical. Large players move quickly. Smaller participants wait. Speed becomes privilege. Fees are often justified as maintenance, as security, as oversight. Sometimes that's true, but fees also shape behavior. High fees discourage movement. Layered fees discourage experimentation. Unclear fees discourage transparency. Over time, people stop asking why the cost exists and focus only on whether they can afford it. When cost replaces understanding, control is complete. Most systems claim to offer choice. You can move your money within limits. You can access your value during approved hours. You can exit in after penalties. This is not freedom. It is managed movement. When every option carries cost, delay, or permission, people choose the path of least resistance. That isn't laziness. It's rational adaptation to constraint. Technology should reduce friction. And yet, in many systems, friction increases as tools improve. Because friction is no longer a limitation. It is a business model. When systems profit from resistance, efficiency becomes a threat. Speed undermines control. Transparency undermines leverage. Direct access undermines intermediaries. So friction is preserved and rebranded as safety. The shift happens when you ask one question: who benefits from this delay, this fee, this permission? If the answer is never you, then friction is not serving you. It is shaping you. Friction trains obedience without commands. It enforces hierarchy without force. It extracts value without confrontation. Flow threatens friction. When value moves directly, there is no surface to skim, no delay to monetize, no permission to withhold. This is why systems built on friction resist change so aggressively. It isn't ideology, it's survival. You do not need to eliminate friction entirely. Even water needs banks to form a river. But when friction exists primarily to extract rather than protect, it becomes control. Understanding this doesn't require rebellion. It requires awareness. Once you recognize friction for what it is, you can decide when it's worth paying and when it's simply another dam pretending to be a bridge. And water, given the chance, always finds another route. Stability is one of the most comforting ideas ever sold. It promises safety, predictability, continuity. But stability, when misunderstood, becomes stagnation. Still water looks calm. It reflects the sky. It appears peaceful. And beneath the surface, it decays. Uncertainty exhausts the nervous system. Humans evolved to survive immediate threats, not prolonged ambiguity. Stability offers relief from constant decision-making. It allows people to plan, to rest, to believe tomorrow will resemble today. Systems learn this early. If you promise stability, people will trade adaptability for comfort. They will accept limitations as long as outcomes feel familiar. Stability reduces resistance more effectively than force. But what feels stable is often just unchallenged. Stability resists change. Resilience absorbs it. A stable structure works until conditions shift. A resilient one expects change as a constant. Water does not try to remain still. It moves to remain intact. Systems that prioritize stability freeze themselves in time. They optimize for yesterday's conditions and treat deviation as risk instead of reality. This is how rot begins. Movement cleans. Circulation refreshes. Flow prevents buildup. When systems stop moving, problems do not disappear. They accumulate. Inefficiencies stack. Inequities deepen. Complexity increases. Trust erodes. The surface remains calm because pressure is distributed slowly. By the time disruption becomes visible, decay is already systemic. Rot is not loud. It is patient. Stability is not just a condition. It is a narrative. Too big to fail. Safe and sound. Protected by regulation. These phrases are designed to quiet doubt. They frame movement as danger and preservation as virtue. People are taught that change is reckless and questioning is irresponsible. But no living system survives by remaining unchanged. When stability becomes sacred, adaptation becomes heresy. Rot begins where inspection is rare. Outdated assumptions, unexamined incentives, deferred maintenance, unchallenged authority. Because nothing appears broken, nothing is fixed. The system continues to function, barely, and that functioning becomes proof of health until it doesn't. Collapse rarely comes from sudden shocks alone. It comes from years of ignored decay finally meeting pressure. Still, systems reward compliance. If you do not move, you are safe. If you do not question, you belong. If you do not adapt, you are predictable. Over time, people internalize this logic. They stop preparing for change and start defending the system itself. That is the final stage of rot. When a system has been still for too long, any movement feels extreme. Even small shifts trigger fear. Even minor disruptions are framed as existential threats. This is not because change is dangerous, but because the system has lost its ability to absorb it. Water that has not flowed becomes fragile. No system escapes change. Stability only postpones it. The longer movement is delayed, the more violent the eventual correction becomes. Pressure that is not released accumulates energy. When release finally comes, it is interpreted as chaos rather than consequence. People blame the storm. They forget the stagnation. Flow is not instability, it is continuous adjustment. Small movements prevent catastrophic shifts. Ongoing circulation keeps systems clean, responsive, and honest. Flow exposes weaknesses early when they can still be addressed. This is why dynamic systems appear messy. They are alive. True stability is not stillness. It is the ability to change without breaking, movement without collapse, adaptation without fear, flow without loss of identity. Water does not rot because it moves. It survives because it refuses to stay still. If a system tells you it cannot change, it is already dying. If it tells you movement is dangerous, it is protecting decay. And if it promises stability above all else, it is asking you to ignore the smell. Still water rots, flow endures, and the difference between the two is not time, it is movement.